I'm 31 now, and if you asked anyone who knows me casually, they'd probably describe me as calm, measured, maybe even cold. But that's not who I am. It's who I had to become to survive my childhood. I grew up in a house that looked perfect from the outside. Clean white siding, a trimmed lawn, hanging baskets in spring. But inside, the air was dense with things no one said. My mother, Diana, controlled the temperature of every room. Not just the thermostat, but the emotional climate too. She wasn't loud. She didn't scream. That would have been too obvious, too messy. She whispered control in cutting comments and long silences. She knew how to make you doubt yourself with just a sigh. My father, Robert, was technically present, but it was like living with a ghost. He sat at the kitchen table most nights reading the newspaper like it was a shield. He rarely looked up, never interfered. Sometimes I wondered if he even liked us. He existed in the house like a piece of furniture, quiet, in the background, unmovable. My brother Trevor was 3 years older. Growing up, he learned early on that being easy was the way to survive. He didn't argue, didn't express strong opinions, and above all, he never challenged my mother. That made him her favorite. Or maybe least resented is more accurate. He was the golden boy because he played by her rules. I didn't. I asked questions. I noticed when things didn't make sense. I pushed back. And for that, I paid. My earliest memory of feeling completely alone was when I was 5. I had drawn a picture of a horse at school and couldn't wait to show it to my mom. I remember holding it up, full of pride, and she barely looked at it before saying, "Why are its legs so short? That's not how horses look." I just stared at her. No smile, no encouragement. Just criticism in that flat, unimpressed voice. I put the drawing on the fridge myself and took it down the next morning. That was the beginning of many small injuries. Things that would seem like nothing on their own but piled up into something sharp and heavy. When I was 7, I came home crying from school because 2 girls had made fun of my lunch, carrot sticks and tuna sandwiches while they had chips and little snack cakes. My mom's response? "You're lucky I even pack your lunch. If you don't like it, make your own." No hug. No concern. Just contempt for having feelings. By the time I was 9, I learned how to predict her moods. I could tell if I was in trouble just by how hard she shut a drawer. If she was mad at my dad, she'd take it out on me. Not directly, she never hit us, but through silence, passive aggression, and those cutting remarks that stayed with me longer than bruises ever could. She once told me that I looked tired and that tired girls were never pretty. I was 10. 10 years old, standing in my pajamas in the hallway, being told I was already losing value. Trevor escaped it by being quiet. He never stood up for me. Not once. He wasn't cruel, just absent. Like my father. There was one night when I was 12 that stands out. I got an AC on a math test. Math was hard for me, and I had studied for hours. When I brought it home, my mother looked at it, then said, "Well, maybe if you spent less time drawing and more time studying, you wouldn't be average." She tossed the paper onto the kitchen counter and walked away. Trevor was sitting right there. He didn't say a word. He didn't even look at me. But things didn't get really bad until I hit puberty. I started pulling away, wanting privacy, independence. That was intolerable to her. I remember wanting to lock my door when I was 13 just to have space, and she flipped. "What do you have to hide?" she asked. I said I just wanted to listen to music and do my homework. She removed the door entirely for 2 weeks. Said if I couldn't be trusted to keep it open, I didn't need one at all. My father said nothing. He just sat in the living room watching baseball. In high school, things got worse. She started controlling what I wore. If I picked out a shirt she didn't like, she'd say it made me look cheap. "You don't want boys looking at you like that," she'd say. But if I dressed conservatively, she'd ask if I was trying to hide something. I couldn't win. It was always about control. I once got invited to a birthday party, and she said no without even asking who it was. "You don't need more friends. Friends are distractions." That was the kind of thing she said all the time. There were some adults in my life who noticed something was off, but they didn't push. One teacher, Miss Carson, pulled me aside after class once and asked if everything was okay at home. I said yes, of course. What else could I say? I knew better than to let anyone in. The consequences would have been worse if my mom found out. And then there was Marlene. She was my mother's sister, my aunt, and she was the only person who ever openly challenged my mother. Marlene lived in Chicago and would visit twice a year. She was loud, opinionated, and wore red lipstick that stained her coffee cups. I loved her instantly. The first time she came over when I was 11, she brought me a necklace with a tiny silver cat charm and called me her girl. My mom rolled her eyes and muttered something about spoiling children. But Marlene didn't care. During one visit, when I was about 14, Marlene asked me what I wanted to do when I got older. Before I could answer, my mom said, "She doesn't need to worry about that yet. She should focus on getting through school first." Marlene turned to me and said, "Well, I think you'd make a great artist." My mother didn't say anything, but she was quiet for the rest of the night, and the next morning she accidentally knocked over my sketchbook and tore a few pages. That same year, I started having panic attacks. I didn't know that's what they were at the time. I just knew that sometimes, out of nowhere, my chest would tighten, my hands would shake, and I'd feel like I was going to throw up or explode. My mom told me I was being dramatic. She said I was making up problems to get attention. When I asked to see a therapist, she told me that only weak people needed therapy. "You're not crazy," she said. "You're just spoiled." At 15, I stopped trying to make her proud. It was easier to go numb. I went through the motions, kept my head down, and waited for the day I could leave. I applied to out-of-state colleges in secret. When I got accepted to one 3 states away, she told me I was being ungrateful. "After everything we've done for you," she said, "this is how you repay us?" I didn't care. I left that fall and never looked back. Except that's not true. I've looked back every day. Because leaving didn't erase the damage. It just stopped the bleeding. The wounds were already there. By the time I turned 14, I had learned one clear truth. My feelings were not safe in my mother's hands. Something inside me clicked that year. I had just started 9th grade. There wasn't a single moment that did it. No final straw. Just the slow, steady erosion of trust, chipped away by years of her indifference, criticism, and that cold smile she wore when I was hurt. I simply stopped sharing. Stopped trying. The warmth most kids expected from a mother wasn't coming, had never come, and I accepted that like someone finally realizing a machine was broken beyond repair. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and didn't care. Either way, it gave me space. Silence became my survival tactic. That was also the year I became really good at lying. It wasn't malicious. It was protective. I lied about why I didn't want to eat dinner with the family. I said I had homework. I lied about why I stayed in my room. I said I was tired. I lied about school, my friends, my grades. If something bad happened, I just handled it myself. School was easier than home, but it still wasn't safe. I kept people at a distance. I didn't trust adults. My teachers liked me because I was quiet and did well, but I didn't let them get close. Kids at school thought I was mature, but really I was just wary. Cautious. One girl, Danny, tried to be my friend that year. She was funny, smart, always chewing on a pen cap. But when she once joked that I seemed like someone who doesn't get grounded ever, I smiled and nodded and never sat near her again. I didn't want anyone guessing what my life was like. At 15, I began to teach myself things most kids never worried about. I started reading manuals. I mean actual manuals, how to change a tire, how to check for mold under a sink, how to unclog a drain. YouTube became my unofficial parent. I learned how to reset a breaker, how to take apart a vacuum, how to clean an air vent. My parents didn't notice because they didn't ask. As long as I kept my grades up and stayed quiet, I was invisible. Cooking came next. My mother was one of those people who cooked the same 5 things on rotation and never let me help. But when she started working part-time at an insurance office, she was gone until 6. That gave me a window. I began experimenting. Grilled vegetables, pasta from scratch, garlic bread with real minced cloves, not powder. I borrowed cookbooks from the library and returned them before anyone saw. One time, I accidentally left out a pan of roasted potatoes. My mother came home, saw them, and asked who made them. I did, I said, trying to sound neutral. She looked at them for a second, then muttered, "Well, don't leave things out. They'll attract ants." No compliment. Not even a thank you. But that was fine. I hadn't done it for her. At 16, I got a part-time job at a used bookstore downtown. I told my parents it was for school credit. It wasn't. I just needed money. The owner, Grace, was in her late 50s, with big round glasses and a habit of humming when she shelved books. She never asked personal questions, which made me feel safe. One night, I stayed after hours helping her rearrange the horror section, and she offered me leftover Chinese food from her dinner. I almost cried, just because she thought I might be hungry. I saved almost every dollar I made. I didn't spend it on clothes or movies or anything other girls my age wanted. I kept it hidden in a shoebox under my bed, wrapped in a pair of socks. I knew someday I'd need it. I also got good at reading people. Really good. Survival teaches you that. I could tell by the way my father set down his coffee mug whether it was safe to sit in the kitchen or better to retreat to my room. I could tell if my mother was angry based on how she folded laundry. Trevor was away at college by then. He left and didn't look back, just like I planned to. He called once every 2 weeks, said hey to our parents, asked about his classes, and hung up. We barely talked. I resented him for that, for escaping first, for leaving me behind. But I never said it. I also had to figure out money, real money. My mom refused to talk about finances. Anytime I asked how bills worked or how taxes were filed, she'd snap, "You don't need to worry about that yet." So I taught myself. I checked books out from the library and read everything I could about banking, credit, and budgeting. By 17, I had opened my own checking account using a minor's account option, with Grace as the cosigner. She didn't ask questions, just filled in the forms. I paid her back by reorganizing the entire nonfiction section without being asked. That year, I also met someone else who changed the trajectory of how I saw myself, Brendan. He wasn't a boyfriend, not really, more like a mentor. He was a regular at the bookstore, maybe 30 or 32. He was quiet, intense, and always bought used philosophy books. I noticed his kindness in small ways. How he picked up books that fell off the shelves, how he always said thank you to Grace, how he asked how my day was and actually waited for the answer. One night, when it was just the two of us in the store, I mentioned I was trying to teach myself home repairs. He looked surprised. "At your age?" I just said, "It's necessary." He didn't pry. He just nodded and said, "Start with plumbing. It's easier than it looks." Then he pulled out a book on basic home maintenance and handed it to me. "Take it. I've read it already." That book became my Bible. I fixed a leaking toilet with it, cleaned out our dryer vent, even recocked the bathtub in the upstairs bathroom. No one noticed. Or if they did, they didn't say anything. By 18, I had made a decision. I was going to graduate early and leave. I loaded up on summer classes and evening credit options through the school's online system. I met with the guidance counselor in secret, after hours. Mrs. Klein. She was thin, always tired looking, with dry hands and a cardigan that never changed color. She asked why I wanted to graduate early. I just need to, I said. That was enough for her. She signed the paperwork. I passed the final requirements in late February. My diploma was processed quietly, without a ceremony. I never told my parents. That spring, they thought I was still in school. I left the house each morning as usual, walked to the coffee shop 2 blocks down, and read for 2 hours before heading to my shift at the bookstore. I kept up the lie for 3 months. They never caught on. Not once. One night in late May, I came home to find my mother in the kitchen, arms crossed, staring at a letter on the counter. "You didn't tell us you graduated," she said flatly. My chest tightened. I didn't think it mattered. She picked up the letter and tapped it with one finger. "It makes us look foolish. People will ask why you're not at the ceremony." "I'm not going," I said. "It's over." My father didn't say a word. He just folded his newspaper slower than usual and left the room. My mother looked at me like she wanted to say more, but instead she just turned around and opened the dishwasher. The conversation was over. I went to my room and packed more seriously after that. My shoebox of money was now $300 thick. Not much, but enough to start something. I didn't need a ceremony. I didn't need a photo of me in a cap and gown. I just needed to be gone. I moved out the week I turned 19. I didn't throw a party. I didn't make a social media post about it. I didn't even tell my parents I was leaving. I just packed my bags the night before, wrote a short note, and left it on the kitchen counter next to the half-eaten toast my mother had left from breakfast. The note said, "I'm moving out. I'm safe. Don't contact me." That was it. I didn't sign it. I had $1,200 in my backpack, a full scholarship to a local college, and a paper grocery bag stuffed with instant noodles, canned beans, and one half-used bottle of shampoo. My other bag had 3 pairs of jeans, a few t-shirts, one decent pair of sneakers, and the same thrifted winter coat I'd worn for 3 years. That was everything I owned. I moved in with a girl named Riley, who I had met through a scholarship housing message board. She was 2 years older than me, studying mechanical engineering, and had a spare room in her tiny 2-bedroom apartment just off campus. When I got there, she greeted me at the door with wet hair and chipped green nail polish, holding a cat that immediately hissed at me. "You must be Selena," she said. "This is Frankie. He doesn't like people, but he'll get over it." I could have cried, not because of the welcome, but because it felt like I could breathe. The apartment was old. Cracked tile in the bathroom, uneven floorboards in the kitchen, and a mystery smell coming from under the sink, but it was warm. Safe. No one was watching me. No one was measuring my worth by how quiet I could be. I got a job the same week, part-time at a diner 4 blocks from campus. I told them I had experience, which was a lie, but I learned fast. I started on dish duty, then moved to hosting, then waitressing. The place was called Mary Lou's, and it had been there since the 80s. The walls were plastered with yellowed newspaper clippings, and the regulars always sat in the same spots. I met my second job through Mary Lou's. One of the regulars, a woman named Trisha, ran a cleaning service. She asked if I wanted to earn extra cash under the table scrubbing offices at night. I said yes without thinking. My third job came out of necessity. The scholarship covered tuition and basic housing, but textbooks, groceries, bus fare, and anything extra, that was on me. So I started working weekend mornings at a dog grooming place called Happy Hounds. I hated it. Dogs peed on my shoes, barked nonstop, and one golden retriever bit my thumb so hard I bled into the sink. But it paid $10 an hour, and I needed it. I lived on instant rice, peanut butter sandwiches, and expired salad kits I got cheap from the grocery outlet. Some weeks I made it work. Some weeks I sold my blood plasma for gas money. I didn't speak to my family. Not once. I blocked their numbers. Blocked Trevor too. He hadn't reached out in over a year anyway, and when he did it was always some vague impersonal text like, "Hope things are good." Hope. Like he didn't know. Riley didn't ask a lot of questions, which I appreciated. She wasn't warm exactly, but she was fair. We had an unspoken agreement. Mutual independence. She worked late in labs. I worked early shifts at the diner. We only really saw each other on Sundays, when we both did laundry and tried to cook something that didn't come from a microwave. One night, a pipe burst under the sink. I got home from cleaning offices at midnight and walked into a kitchen filled with 2 inches of cold water. "God damn it," Riley muttered, stepping in behind me. I got down on my knees, soaked my jeans, and used the same wrench I'd carried in my backpack since I was 17. 10 minutes later, the water was off. She stared at me. "How do you know how to do that?" I wiped my hands on a towel. I used to fix things at home. It was easier than asking. That was the first time she really looked at me. After that, we talked a bit more. Not about our families, but about books, weird customers, and how bad the university cafeteria coffee was. She let me borrow her bike. I taught her how to rewire a lamp. The shock came in the form of an envelope. It arrived 2 months after I moved out, forwarded to the apartment by the college administration office. My mother had written "Forward to Student" in red Sharpie on the front, in that all-caps handwriting she used for grocery lists and passive-aggressive notes. I almost threw it away. But curiosity won. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting. No emotion. Just a typed list. Your health insurance expires in December. The dentist appointment in August is cancelled. You'll need to transfer your bank account. I closed the joint one. Trevor said you haven't replied to him. That's rude. Do not expect financial support. No, I miss you. No, are you okay? That letter told me everything I already knew. I threw it in the trash, took the bus to work, and scraped grease off a grill for 5 hours with a torn glove. But then, weirdly, my father showed up. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon, the kind where the sidewalks steam and car tires hiss when they pass. I had just finished class and was heading to the bookstore when I saw a familiar car parked at the curb, his old black Buick. I froze. He stepped out, wearing the same tan jacket I remembered from every childhood Thanksgiving. I hadn't seen him in nearly a year. "Selena," he said. I didn't answer. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I might throw up on the pavement. "I just want to talk," he added, hands in his pockets like he was asking for directions. I let him walk with me. Not because I forgave him. Because I wanted to see what kind of man would ignore his daughter for 19 years and then suddenly show up on a campus he'd never visited. We sat on a bench near the library. He asked how I was. I said fine. He nodded, said I looked tired. "I work," I said. "I figured," he replied. Then he said something that nearly made me laugh out loud. "Your mother's been having a hard time since you left. Like I was supposed to care. Like I was supposed to feel guilty." He asked if I needed anything. I said no. He said, "Okay," and left. Just like that. No hug. No real apology. Just this awkward performance of fatherhood that came 19 years too late. After that, I changed my class schedule. I avoided public benches. I stopped telling anyone where I worked, just in case. I didn't want them to find me again. Riley got a boyfriend. He moved in gradually. First it was just a toothbrush, then socks in the dryer, then one day I came home and his PlayStation was plugged into the living room TV. His name was Luke. I didn't like him. He was loud, always joking in ways that made my skin crawl. He once asked me if I was a nun because I didn't date. Another time he walked into the bathroom while I was brushing my teeth and said, "Don't worry, I've seen worse faces in the morning." Riley laughed. I didn't. When I brought it up, she shrugged. "He's just messing around. He doesn't mean anything by it." So I adjusted again. I stayed in my room. I studied, worked, and kept my mouth shut. At night, I sometimes curled up on my bed and listened to their muffled arguments through the wall. She yelled a lot more than I'd expected. Maybe we weren't so different after all. By the end of that first year, I had made it through 3 terms, kept a 3.9 GPA, and managed not to collapse. Barely. One morning, I passed out at work, right in the kitchen of Mary Lou's, between the dishwasher and the walk-in freezer. One second I was scrubbing pans, the next I was on the floor with Trisha slapping my face and shouting my name. Turned out I had low iron. Stress, lack of sleep, and eating like a raccoon for 6 months hadn't helped. Grace, the old bookstore owner who still checked in on me sometimes, brought me soup and multivitamins and told me to take at least 1 day off a week. I promised I would. I lied. I survived, though. Through every burned finger, every soaked shoe, every bus that broke down in the rain. I survived by never looking back. I told myself, they don't get to have me. Not anymore. Graduating college should have felt like some great accomplishment, but I walked across that stage with my name mispronounced, my gown too big, and my phone on silent, knowing no one was in the crowd for me. No parents, no brother, no childhood friend waving from the bleachers. Just a piece of paper with 2 degrees that I had fought like hell for, mechanical engineering and environmental science. I didn't walk for applause. I walked because I wanted a picture of myself holding that diploma, so I could remember that even if no one clapped, I'd still made it. By then, Riley had moved out. Her boyfriend Luke got her pregnant the fall of our last year, and they left campus before winter break. I stayed behind and took over the whole apartment, used her old room to build a desk from scrap plywood I found behind a hardware store, and made it my study bunker. I didn't hear from her again. After graduation, I gave myself 1 week. 1 week to pack, 1 week to sleep, 1 week to finally breathe. Then I moved. I relocated to a small city 4 hours north. It was big enough to have its own culture and job market, but small enough that rent didn't require 6 roommates. I had gotten a job offer from a startup called Greenform Solutions, an early-stage clean tech firm run by ex-Silicon Valley types with a grant from the Department of Energy and a dream of revolutionizing sustainable infrastructure. The offer was for $65,000 a year. It felt unreal. It was more money than my entire household ever made when I was growing up. I read the email 5 times before I let myself believe it. My new apartment was temporary. Just a 1-room sublet above a bakery with no real kitchen, 1 window that faced an alley, and walls thin enough to hear every closing cash register. But I didn't care. It was mine. I slept on a twin mattress on the floor and stacked my books in milk crates. For the first time in my life, I could eat a hot meal and not worry someone was going to ask what I'd done to deserve it. Work was chaotic. Greenform was run by 4 co-founders, each more eccentric than the last. There was Sierra, the CEO, a red-lipsticked former geologist who swore constantly and drank her coffee from a mason jar. Toby, the CTO, wore flip-flops year-round and carried a vape in one sock. Raphael, head of operations, had a past life in logistics for Amazon and never smiled without an agenda. And finally Mira, my manager, head of sustainability design, who had a permanent caffeine twitch and once gave me a lecture about algae batteries while microwaving salmon. But they saw me. They respected my dual degree. They liked that I didn't just draw up schematics but could explain exactly how rainwater harvesting worked and why it mattered. I started with CAD modeling, then quickly moved into prototyping and site testing. 2 months into the job, Mira pulled me aside after a brutal meeting with city engineers and said, "You don't sound like a rookie. You talk like someone who's been doing this for 10 years. I just said, "I've had to figure out a lot of things on my own." She didn't press. Just nodded and told me to take the lead on our next design pitch. With my first real paycheck, I bought proper work boots and a cordless drill set. With the second, I paid off the last $212 I still owed on my student health fees. Then I started saving for something that had been eating at me since the day I got my offer letter, a home. Not an apartment. Not a shared basement or a corner of someone else's world. A house. My house. Everyone thought I was crazy. The market was unpredictable, and I was barely out of college. But I wasn't looking for perfect. I was looking for possible. I found it on the edge of town, a 2-bedroom, 1-bath bungalow built in the 1950s, with a cracked foundation, rotted porch, and a front door that leaned like it had arthritis. But it was listed at $82,000, cash only. I made an offer of $74,000, and to my shock, they accepted. I drained my savings, maxed out my first credit card on the closing costs, and got the keys 6 weeks later. The first time I stepped inside, the floors creaked so loud I thought something had broken under me. The wallpaper was peeling. The kitchen smelled like old grease and mice. The bathroom tiles were yellowed with mold. But it was mine. The first night, I slept on a camping mat in the living room with a flashlight, a hammer, and a can of pepper spray by my side. The place didn't even have electricity yet. I didn't care. It was the first time in my life I felt completely safe. I started with the bathroom. Ripped out the moldy tile, pulled up the warped linoleum, and found hardwood beneath. I taught myself how to sand, seal, and refinish. I learned how to shut off the water main. I replaced the leaky toilet myself with parts from a salvage yard and YouTube tutorials. Every Saturday morning, I was at estate sales and hardware outlets, buying tools and fixtures no one else wanted. A sink with a cracked edge? $10. A light fixture missing 2 screws? $5. It became a game. How much beauty could I create out of what others threw away? One night while installing drywall in the hallway, I slipped on a ladder and tore my palm open on an exposed nail. It was bad, deep enough to see the layers beneath the skin. I wrapped it in an old t-shirt and drove myself to urgent care, where the nurse kept asking if someone had hurt me. No, I said. Just me and poor choices. It took 8 stitches. I wore a bandage for 2 weeks and learned how to hang drywall one-handed. Then came the roof. That was too big for me to do alone. I called in a roofing crew and negotiated a payment plan that would have made my mother faint. But when it was done, the leak stopped. I could finally sleep without a bucket under the bedroom window. At work, things were accelerating too. We landed our first real municipal contract, retrofitting stormwater systems to support flood prevention. I was put in charge of sensor placement. Toby told the client I was our genius problem solver, and even though I knew it was flattery, it still felt like someone had finally seen the full picture of who I was. But not everything went smoothly. One of the contractors I hired for the HVAC system, Dean, a man in his 40s with a beer gut and a fake smile, tried to overcharge me by $2,000 after telling me I probably don't understand all the technical stuff. I pulled out the contract, pointed to the itemized estimate, and said, "I'm an engineer." "You're lying." He backed off, but not before muttering something about girls like you getting uppity. I filed a complaint. Found a new contractor. Got the system done cheaper with a company run by a woman named Letitia, who ran her crew like a military unit and gave me a discount when she found out I'd done my own electrical wiring. Then there was the raccoon. It crawled into the attic through a missing vent and lived above my bedroom for 3 nights before I figured it out. The scratching kept me up. I assumed it was pipes until I saw the shredded insulation. I set a trap myself. Caught it on the 4th night. Released it 5 miles outside town in the middle of a thunderstorm, soaked to my skin, laughing like a lunatic in the dark. "Not today, motherfucker," I said out loud. And I meant it. By winter, the house was alive. The walls were painted soft grays and forest greens. The floors glowed from oil and polish. I had thrifted rugs, mismatched furniture, and a kitchen that finally didn't smell like death. I built a coffee bar out of an old dresser. I installed open shelving. I turned the second bedroom into a reading nook with a papasan chair and string lights. It looked like something out of a Pinterest board run by someone who refused to buy anything new. I started hosting weekly dinners for coworkers. Not big parties. Just 4 or 5 people, cheap wine, spaghetti, and long conversations. Mira came once and cried over my garlic bread. Said it reminded her of her grandmother's. When I asked her if she wanted to take some home, she said, "Selena, this feels like a real home. Like the kind I always wanted." I almost told her everything then. About the silence, the cold, the years of scraping myself together. But I just smiled and said, "Me too." I hadn't spoken to my grandfather in nearly 7 years. His name was Howard. My mom's father. A stubborn, gruff man who always wore the same brown jacket and carried peppermints in his pockets. Growing up, he never said much to me. But I remembered how he'd quietly leave envelopes of cash on the table at Christmas. No explanations. Just, here, kid. I remembered how he once fixed my bike when I was 12 without saying a word to me. Just wheeled it into the garage and replaced the chain while I stood in the driveway pretending not to cry. He never really challenged my mother, but he didn't go out of his way to praise her either. That, in hindsight, said a lot. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was brushing grout in my upstairs bathroom. A lawyer named Margot Riley left a message on my voicemail. Polite but formal. Mississippi Lane, I'm calling on behalf of the estate of Howard L. Barrett. Your presence is requested for a reading of the will. Please contact me at your earliest convenience. I sat down on the edge of the tub, toothbrush still in hand, and listened to the message 3 times. I didn't even know he had died. He passed 2 weeks earlier from a stroke. No one in my family thought to tell me. No call. No text. No obituary sent my way. But now, suddenly, I was requested. I drove the 3 hours to Margot's office, a bland windowless building near the county courthouse. She met me in a pinstripe blazer and wire-rimmed glasses, hair pinned back so tight I wondered if she could even blink. You're listed as a direct beneficiary, she said. Mr. Barrett left specific instructions. I expected a sentimental note. A watch. Maybe an old coin collection or a photo album. I did not expect a $90,000 trust fund, released in full with no stipulations other than that it go directly to me, no intermediaries, no cosigners. I sat there stunned while Margot calmly read through the legal language. He specified that the fund is to be used at your discretion. He did not wish your mother or any other relative to have knowledge of the amount or access to the account. Too late for that. They found out within days. It started small. A Facebook friend request from an account named Joanne Rivers. No photo. No mutuals. I deleted it. Then came the message. You always were good at taking what wasn't yours. Next, a number I didn't recognize texted me. Nice house. Grandpa's money fixing the roof. That one made me freeze. I walked around my property, checking for cameras or signs that someone had been watching. Nothing. But it was enough to make me keep the lights off for the rest of the week. Then I got the email from Trevor. The subject line said, "We need to talk." The body? One line. "You know what you did." I didn't reply. He sent another. "Mom's going to contest. You should return the money and avoid trouble." Then came the voicemails. My Uncle Jim, my mother's older brother, left a 7-minute tirade that started with "you little bitch" and escalated to threats of legal action, character assassination, and some half-baked accusation that I had manipulated an old man for cash. I saved every message. I got in touch with Margot immediately. She wasn't surprised. "They've already contacted me," she said. "They're trying to claim undue influence and lack of mental capacity. Standard fare. Can they take it? There's no case. The trust was signed and notarized 2 years ago. We have video documentation of the signing, physician evaluations from the same month, and witnesses. Then why do they think they can win?" She adjusted her glasses. "Because people like them don't want to believe someone chose to love you more than them." I went back home and waited for the next shoe to drop. It did. 3 days later. My mailbox was smashed in. Not just knocked over, obliterated. Metal twisted, the post split. A dead rat was left inside, taped to a note that said, "This is what thieves get." I didn't cry. I called the police. They were polite but dismissive. No witnesses. Could have been teenagers. "I don't have teenagers randomly driving to a dead-end street," I said. They filed a report and gave me a number to call if it happened again. It did. I installed a camera system, 6 motion-activated units around the house and 1 in my car. The next time someone stepped foot on my porch, I'd know. Meanwhile, the online harassment escalated. I found posts about me on anonymous forums: "Ungrateful granddaughter steals inheritance. Engineering bitch robs her family blind." Screenshots of my LinkedIn profile appeared on some conspiracy subreddit claiming I had seduced my dying grandfather. Trevor sent me another email. "We're hiring a private investigator. You should lawyer up." I forwarded it to Margot. She said, "Let them waste their money. They're not getting yours." Then I got a call from a woman named Candace, an old coworker from the diner I'd worked at years ago. We hadn't spoken in almost 3 years. "Selena, your mom messaged me," she said. "She asked for your address. Said you were missing and she was worried. Did you give it to her?" "No, of course not. But she also called my aunt." How the hell does she even know her name? Because she was digging. Because she didn't care what bridges she burned as long as she got what she wanted. Margot filed a restraining order against direct contact. I filed one myself for harassment. We included the mailbox incident, the emails, the social media stalking, and the indirect outreach attempts. It wasn't enough. That's when the anonymous packages started arriving. The first was a box filled with shredded newspaper and a single black rose, clearly fake. The next, a bloody baby doll missing one eye. No return address, no fingerprints. Just that smell, like gasoline and anger. I stopped checking my mail after dark. One Saturday, I returned home from grocery shopping to find my back door unlocked. I always locked it. Always. I checked the house room by room, crowbar in hand. Nothing was missing. But the air felt disturbed. Like someone had been there. I replaced the locks the next morning. Bought a 90-decibel security siren and installed it on every window. Then came the court notice. They were officially contesting the will. filing claims of manipulation, citing a estranged relationship and mental incompetence. They were using my own independence as proof that I had alienated the family for financial gain. Trevor submitted a statement. In it, he called me unstable, manipulative, and prone to emotional theatrics since childhood. I read it all. Every lie. Every low blow. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I sent Margot everything. She drafted a formal response. The trust was airtight. My grandfather had updated it twice. In both versions, I was the sole individual named outside of standard funeral expenses. My mother wasn't even mentioned. The hearing was set for April. In the meantime, I lived like I was being hunted. Because I was. I hadn't spoken to anyone in my family in over 3 years when the letter came. It was a white envelope with no return address, just my full name typed on the front. I almost tossed it, thinking it was junk or a political flyer. But when I opened it and unfolded the legal-sized sheet inside, I had to sit down. My grandfather, Howard Barrett, had passed away, and he'd left me $90,000 in a trust fund. There was no note. No sentimental letter or message from beyond the grave. Just the official statement from a law firm called Riley Dawes, listing me as the sole individual beneficiary aside from funeral expenses. I read it 3 times. Then I sat there at my kitchen table in complete silence for what felt like an hour. I hadn't even known he died. We weren't close. He was my mother's father, a retired factory foreman with old-school manners and a chronic limp from a busted knee back in the 70s. I remembered him mostly for his silence and occasional sardonic jokes, nothing overly warm, but he was never cruel like my mother. In fact, he was the only adult from my childhood who never once raised his voice at me. He visited less and less as I got older, especially after I left home and cut ties with the family. I figured he'd been forced to choose sides, or maybe he just didn't want the conflict. I never blamed him. He kept his distance. I figured he'd forgotten about me entirely. Apparently not. 2 weeks later, I had my first meeting with the firm that handled the estate. Margot Riley was the attorney listed on the file. She was in her early 50s, severe posture, tightly styled gray blonde hair, and eyes that scanned everything like a microscope. He updated the trust 2 years ago, she explained. Specified you as sole recipient of the discretionary inheritance amount. It's separate from the estate divided between your mother, Uncle Jim, and Uncle Stuart. How much did they get? I asked, not really expecting an answer. Substantially less, she replied flatly. And just like that, everything exploded. I didn't tell anyone. Didn't post it, didn't talk about it, didn't reply to the email Margot CC'd me on with the bank's instructions. But it didn't matter. 3 days after the meeting, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. The voice on the recording was my mother's. Selena, call me. You know why. You should do the right thing before this gets ugly. That night, I got a friend request from an account named April Hawthorne. No mutuals. No photo. I declined it. The next day, a message from the same account landed in my inbox. You've always been good at pretending. Let's see how long that lasts. I blocked the account and moved on. But they didn't. Over the next few days, I got 4 emails from different addresses. All anonymous. All filled with accusations. You manipulated an old man. You're disgusting. Give it back before you regret it. Then my brother Trevor reached out. I hadn't spoken to him since college, and even then it was strained. His email was just 2 sentences. We're contesting the will. You'll hear from the lawyers soon. You always were selfish. I didn't reply. A week later, I received an official notice from Riley and Dawes informing me that the family was attempting to challenge the trust. They were claiming undue influence, emotional manipulation, and mental decline on my grandfather's part, all classic tactics in will disputes. The entire thing reeked of desperation. Margot called to warn me. Don't panic, she said. We've seen this before. The documentation is airtight. She reminded me that my grandfather had made the changes 2 years before his death, while fully competent. There were recorded conversations, doctors' evaluations, even a notarized statement from one of his friends, an old neighbor named Lou Carmichael, confirming that Howard had openly discussed leaving me something to give her a better life than Diana ever did. Still, it didn't stop the harassment. A week after Trevor's message, someone smashed my porch light. I came home from work to find shattered glass and the bulb yanked from its socket. Nothing stolen. Just a message. Then came the postcards. One had a picture of a cemetery and the words, "See you soon." Another just said, "Thief" in red ink. No postmark. No return address. I installed cameras around the house. That night, I got a text from another unknown number. Won't be so easy to run when we're inside. I slept with a crowbar next to my bed and the hallway lights on. Things escalated quickly. I started receiving harassing messages through my old work email, the one from the sustainability startup I'd left just a month earlier. Messages accusing me of theft, manipulation, even elder abuse. Some were worded in ways that made it clear the sender knew personal things. The color of my front door, the name of my former landlord, what kind of car I drove. I knew it was someone close to the family, or someone they'd enlisted. Then I found out about Derek. He was a former paralegal who had been disbarred for leaking case files. Apparently, my Uncle Jim had paid him to look into me. That included digging up my college records, contacting old employers, and even pretending to be a recruiter to try to bait me into a phone call. I didn't fall for it, but I was shaken. I filed a report with local police. They took it seriously enough to assign a case number, but not enough to follow up. The detective said, "Sounds like a civil dispute. If anything physical happens, call 911. Right. A week later, someone slashed 2 of my tires in my driveway. I found them at 7 a.m. before work, both front wheels completely flat. The camera caught a blurry figure in a hoodie, face obscured. No license plate. No clear shot. Useless. Margot filed for a restraining order on my behalf against any direct contact from my mother, brother, and both uncles. It was granted. Not that it did much. They switched to indirect harassment. Suddenly, people I barely knew were getting messages about me. A woman I once volunteered with at a local community garden texted me in confusion. "Did your mom really say you're mentally unwell?" She messaged me. "What's going on?" My former landlord called and asked if I was in danger. "A man came by asking questions about you," he said. Said he was a family member doing a wellness check. I was being followed. I started taking alternate routes home, switching up my grocery schedule, and only going out with sunglasses and a hoodie. My anxiety got so bad I couldn't sleep more than 3 hours at a time. Every creak in the house felt like a break-in. Every shadow through the curtains looked like someone waiting. Then came the hearing. It was held in the same town I'd grown up in a county courtroom with outdated chairs and buzzing fluorescent lights. I wore a black blazer and gray slacks. I brought a folder of documents, emails, and screenshots. Margot sat beside me, calm, unfazed. My mother glared at me across the aisle. My brother wouldn't look at me. Uncle Jim whispered something to his lawyer and smirked. Uncle Stuart just stared at the floor. Their attorney made the usual case, that I had cut contact with the family, that my grandfather had no meaningful relationship with me, that I had suddenly appeared in his will without precedent. Margot played the video of Howard's trust declaration. In it, he looked straight into the camera and said, "I'm giving this money to Selena because I want her to have a chance at something better. The rest of them already showed me who they are." The judge dismissed the challenge. Just like that. 10 minutes after closing arguments. It was over. Or at least the legal part was. The next morning, I found a dead pigeon on my doorstep, wrapped in newspaper, mouth taped shut. Starting a nonprofit was never part of the plan. I didn't wake up one day with a grand vision or a pitch deck. It started because I met Casey. She showed up at a free workshop I ran at the community center. I'd volunteered to teach a 2-hour session on basic apartment repairs for renters. How to reset a breaker, fix a leaky faucet, unclog a garbage disposal without making it worse. She sat in the back, didn't talk, kept her hoodie up the whole time. Everyone else left after the QA. She lingered, quiet, barely looked at me. Then she said, "Can you teach me how to change a lock?" That's how it began. Casey was 19, freshly aged out of foster care, couch surfing, and barely holding down a part-time job at a gas station. Her foster mom had kicked her out the day she graduated high school. "House rules change when you're legal," she told her. That was it. Casey hadn't seen her since. She had nothing. No ID, no birth certificate, no bank account. I took her out for lunch and realized she didn't know how to use a debit card. She'd been paid in cash under the table for months. Over greasy fries and a milkshake, I heard pieces of her story. I recognized parts of myself in every corner of it. No safety net. No adults worth trusting. No one to teach you anything that mattered. I helped her find temporary housing through a shelter contact I had. Got her a library card. Showed her how to budget using the envelope method. A week later, she brought a friend. Then that friend brought another girl. In 6 weeks, I had 9 young women coming to my house every Saturday afternoon. They needed everything. How to set up utilities. What to look for in a lease. How to spot scams. How to talk to a cop without getting manipulated. How to create a credit file from scratch when you had no co-signers or family support. How to fix a flat tire. How to read a pay stub. How to file a report when your boss stole your hours. It was overwhelming. And it was the most purposeful I'd ever felt in my life. So I made it official. I called it the Unchosen Project. Because every girl who showed up had the same story. No one chose them. Not parents. Not teachers. Not caseworkers. Not employers. They were always the afterthought. The invisible ones. I filed the paperwork, set up a board, and used part of the money my grandfather left me to rent a rundown office space near the transit hub. Close enough for girls without cars, far enough from the neighborhoods that reminded them of everything they'd escaped. My first hire was Mira Sanchez, a former caseworker turned activist who'd burned out from state bureaucracy. She was blunt, sharp-eyed, and had a voice that could silence an entire room. She taught workshops on tenant law and consent. She also handled our crisis intake. Then came Aaliyah, a 23-year-old single mom who'd aged out herself and now taught cooking and meal planning on a budget. She ran sessions on batch cooking, grocery store math, and how to feed yourself when you had $17 in a microwave. And then there was the Tech girl. Tall, quiet, and always carrying a laptop covered in stickers that said things like, "Encrypt everything and rage with purpose." She was a genius with social media, got our website up in a week, and taught the girls how to spot phishing scams and wipe a stolen phone before someone used it against them. The first shocking moment came just 4 months in. Janelle, age 20, came in for a budgeting class, eyes swollen. She wouldn't talk. But after the session, I found her in the hallway crying. She finally admitted she'd been living with her ex-boyfriend, who refused to put her name on the lease and regularly threatened to throw her out naked if she made him mad. That night, We got her into a shelter. 2 weeks later, she came back with a bruised jaw and an eviction notice. He'd found her. Mira went nuclear. She called her contacts and got Janelle a spot in a transitional housing program within 24 hours. The landlord tried to claim she owed damages for unauthorized exit. Mira threatened to report him for housing fraud. He backed off fast. That was the day I realized we weren't just teaching skills. We were running a war room. We held classes by day, made emergency calls at night. We taught girls how to hold a wrench in one hand and a cease and desist letter in the other. The city ignored us. The state refused funding. But the girls came. By month 8, we had over 50 participants. Ages ranged from 18 to 26. Some had GEDs. Some didn't. Some had survived trafficking. Others had lived in 10 homes before they were old enough to vote. One girl, Tasha, only had a 6th grade reading level and could rebuild a car engine from scratch. Another, Harmony, was HIV positive, undocumented, and knew more about street law than any lawyer I'd ever met. We weren't just a program. We were a system they built for themselves. Then someone tried to shut us down. It started with a zoning complaint. Noise violations, unauthorized use of property. Then a visit from a city inspector who claimed we were running unlicensed vocational training. Our permit was up to date. I showed him everything. He mumbled something about anonymous complaints and left. 3 days later, a man claiming to be a concerned father sent an email to every local parent Facebook group, accusing us of radicalizing vulnerable girls and promoting hatred of the family structure. He included quotes taken out of context from our self-defense class. Myra's voice saying, "You have the right to say no to your boyfriend, even if he pays your rent," had been clipped to sound like we were encouraging girls to abandon relationships entirely. Z traced the fake email domain. It led back to an IP in our city. Nothing specific. But we knew. I got a letter in my mailbox the next morning. No stamp. Hand-delivered. Teaching girls to hate their blood? Shame on you. Family is everything. It was printed on my old family printer model. I recognized the ink smudge in the top right corner. Same as the ones I used to use for high school essays. My mother had found out. I hadn't spoken to her since the trust fund battle. I didn't even know she knew I was running this. But it didn't matter. She knew now. Then the interviews started. 2 of our girls, Becca and Lily, were approached by strangers posing as freelance reporters. One claimed to be doing a story on inspirational nonprofits. Another claimed she was writing about fraud in local charities. They asked leading questions. Filmed without permission. One of them even followed Becca home. We filed a police report. Nothing happened. But our enrollment doubled the next month. Apparently, getting harassed made us more trustworthy. Still, it wasn't easy. The burnout was real. Mira had a panic attack in the break room after getting a voicemail from an abuser she'd helped put away. Aaliyah almost quit when her ex tried to use her involvement with us in a custody battle. Z got doxxed. Her address posted online with photos of her front door. I sat in my office one night at 1 a.m. surrounded by empty coffee cups and a whiteboard full of notes when it hit me. We were doing the government's job. We were raising kids who'd already been left behind twice, once by their families, once by the system. We got them bank accounts. We helped them expunge minor records. We paid for 3 girls to take their GEDs. We had 5 girls get accepted to college that spring. But we also had losses. Jasmine, 19, missed 3 workshops. When she finally came in, her arm was in a sling. She wouldn't talk. A month later, she disappeared. Phone disconnected. Instagram wiped. Gone. We called shelters. Nothing. Her last snap said, "New city, new me." I hope that's true. One girl overdosed. Another went back to her trafficker. We grieved quietly, then showed up the next day to teach a class on renter's insurance. Because someone had to. It started with a friend request. I was scrolling through my nonprofit's Instagram account, approving workshop photos and tagging sponsors, when I saw it. A new follow request from a private account. Username at d.lane.43. No profile picture. No bio. But the name stopped me cold. It was my mother. I didn't accept it. I didn't block it either. I just stared at the screen until the battery died in my hand. That same week, I got an email from a law office I didn't recognize, Trenholm White, with a subject line that simply read, "Family Estate Matter, Diana Lane Inquiry." It wasn't about money. It was a request for mediation. Apparently, my mother wanted to establish a structured channel of contact to rebuild familial ties in light of recent public visibility. Public visibility. That's what they called it. Ever since the Unchosen project had gotten covered by a regional news station for its impact, I'd had a steady stream of media interest, speaking invitations, even a podcast appearance. I didn't say anything about my personal story. I never even used my last name publicly. But someone in the family had clearly found the coverage. She was trying to wedge her way back in through lawyers. I sent the inquiry to Margot, who still handled my legal protections. Her response was short. No action required. Nothing binding. She's fishing. 2 weeks later, the lawyer followed up. This time, they requested a non-confrontational video call to revisit the basis of the estrangement and clarify misunderstandings. Misunderstandings. I sent a 1-line reply. There is no misunderstanding. There is no relationship. They didn't respond again. I thought that would be the end of it. But then Riley reached out. I hadn't spoken to her since she left college. We hadn't ended on bad terms, just faded. She messaged me out of nowhere asking if I had a minute to talk. We met at a tea shop downtown. She looked older, tired, thinner. She'd split from Luke, was raising 2 kids on her own now, working nights at a warehouse. We exchanged small talk for 10 minutes before she dropped it. Your mom called my job. I blinked. What? She asked if we'd ever lived together. If you ever mentioned your grandfather's estate. If you'd ever talked about what happened when you were a teenager. My blood ran cold. She didn't say she was your mom at first, Riley went on. She used a fake name. But her voice. I remembered it from that one time she called our apartment asking for you. She paused. I told her to go to hell. Just thought you should know. I nodded. Bought Riley's tea. Hugged her goodbye. That night, I added another motion sensor to my front gate. 2 weeks later, the letter arrived. It was handwritten in that same tight, precise cursive I remembered from her grocery lists. No envelope. Just folded into thirds and placed inside my nonprofit's mailbox. No stamp. No name on the outside. But I knew. I unfolded it carefully, standing there in the kitchen with the back door still unlocked behind me. The letter read, You really always planned to leave, didn't you? Even when you were a child. I see that now. You wanted out from the beginning. You think you're better than us. Maybe you are. But blood is blood. You can't change who you came from. No matter how many girls you rescue. That word, rescue, in quotes. Like she couldn't even say it without mocking it. I hope one day you understand that walking away doesn't mean you're free. It just means you've made your own cage. You'll see. Sooner or later. You'll see. No signature. Just those final 4 words underlined twice. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked to the backyard, lit the grill I used to teach fire safety in one of our survival workshops, and burned the letter page by page. I stood there with the flames flickering up, thinking of the girl I used to be, the one who hid in closets when drawers slammed too hard, the one who flinched at compliments because they always came with a catch. And for the first time, I realized something I'd never dared to say out loud. I didn't run away. I grew up. I didn't escape. I built. I didn't cut myself off. I chose to start over, somewhere no one got to define me by what they needed from me or how quiet I could be. I spent years thinking I was unfinished, like my story was a half-written sentence stuck under someone else's thumb, but I had written the rest. Alone. In full sentences. In real places. With real people who weren't perfect, but who chose to show up. That week, Shauna moved into our emergency housing program. 19, kicked out by her stepfather for refusing to work in his business, which turned out to be stealing catalytic converters and flipping them for cash. She showed up with 2 duffel bags, 1 shattered phone, and a stray cat she refused to leave behind. Mira got her settled. Z found her a secure phone. Aaliyah added extra portions to our dinner plan. I helped her fix a broken hinge on her suitcase and told her we'd get her ID paperwork sorted in the morning. At bedtime she asked, do I have to check in with someone? Like a curfew or anything? I smiled. No. But we do lock the doors after 10, so don't leave your cat outside. She stared at me. You mean, I can just go to sleep? Yeah, I said. That's kind of the point. That night, I lay in bed with the window cracked open just enough to hear the wind shift through the trees. I thought about every girl who had ever sat in our workshop circle and said, I thought I was the only one. I thought about the first time I learned how to change a lock, not because someone taught me, but because no one would. And I thought about my mother's letter, already ash in the bottom of a grill. That was her final attempt. The last thread between us, burned without ceremony. And the silence that followed? It was louder than anything she'd ever screamed. But I wasn't empty. I wasn't hollowed out by her absence. I was full. Full of stories. Full of names and lives and girls who had been told they were too much, or not enough, or nothing at all, and who now had a key to a door no one could slam on them again. I had a purpose. And it wasn't revenge. It wasn't proving anything. It was a door left unlocked for the next girl who needed it.